I was home alone for the week. My family had gone on vacation, but I had to stay behind for work. It was around 2 a.m., and I had decided to watch a horror movie in the basement, determined to see just how much I could scare myself while knowing I was safe in my own home. Then I heard footsteps on the first floor. Pounding footsteps. My blood ran cold. My family wasn't home. Yet the sound was unmistakable. Heavy steps passing through the hallway, right past the basement door. I reacted on instinct, shutting off the television immediately. The basement door was up a flight of stairs and around a corner. Whoever was up there wouldn't have seen the light, but had they heard the TV? I barely had time to think before I heard it. The basement door handle clicked and began to turn. I moved slowly, deliberately, as if any noise would give me away. Crawling behind the large television, I pressed my body against the cold floor. Then I realized my mistake. The black screen still glowed faintly. The creaky basement stairs groaned. Someone was coming down. I held my breath, listening as the footsteps reached the bottom. Then, nothing. Minutes passed. I lay there, heart pounding, waiting for the slightest sound. Had they seen the TV's afterglow? Were they standing motionless in the dark, listening for me? It didn't make sense. If an intruder was there, could they really stand so still? Could they mask every breath, every shift of weight? The basement was silent. Too silent. My mind raced. If there was someone in the basement, they never left. I would have heard the stairs creak again. The door handle would have clicked, but there was only silence, stretching on and on until it became unbearable. I tried to keep track of time, counting seconds in my head. I reached 60, then another 60, and another. I counted for what felt like an eternity. Drool slipped from my mouth onto the carpet, but I didn't dare swallow. My initial terror had dulled into confusion. How long had I been like this? Nearly 2 hours? That's when I smelled it. A thick, cloying odor, like rotting meat. Dread crawled up my spine. The basement had smelled fine earlier. Had something died down here? My mind conjured up nightmarish images. A corpse, standing in the dark, listening to me. I couldn't stay frozen forever. Eventually the sun would rise. Light would seep through the small basement windows, and I'd see whatever was standing there in the dark. I wasn't going to wait for that. Slowly, carefully, I started moving toward the stairs, pressing against the wall. If someone was there, I could go around them, slip past, and bolt up the stairs. The stench grew stronger. Just as I reached the base of the stairs, there was an enormous crash, like something heavy collapsing onto the floor. I didn't hesitate. I bolted, sprinting up the stairs 2 at a time, crashing through the open basement door. And the front door was wide open. My house was no longer safe. Heart hammering, I ran outside and called the police. I stood in the cold, staring at my house from across the street, barely breathing. The front door swayed slightly in the wind. Had I left it unlocked? The police arrived within minutes. They searched the house, checking every room, every corner. When they finally came out, their expressions were grim. They had found a body. My elderly neighbor. He had apparently suffered a heart attack inside my house. The police suspected he had wandered in, looking for help. Maybe I had left the front door unlocked. Maybe he had collapsed just as he reached the basement. At first, I felt sick with guilt. I had sat there hiding in the dark while a dying man lay just feet away from me. Then I remembered something. The noise. The loud crash that had sent me running. What about the noise I heard? I asked. Like something fell. One officer glanced at the other before answering. We aren't sure what caused that. And the back door? I pressed. Was it locked? A pause. Then, the answer that made my stomach drop. Number. The back door was open. My skin crawled. Was there any sign that someone else had been in the house? The officer hesitated. Then, we found a single muddy footprint just outside the back door. I felt lightheaded. Someone else had been inside. They had been down there in the basement with me, watching, waiting, listening. I had been so terrified of the wrong thing. While I lay frozen in the dark, convinced the silence meant I was alone, someone else had been standing there too, completely still, holding their breath. I don't know what they wanted, and I never found out. I got a great deal on the house on Elmwood Drive. 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, and a basement big enough to store all my junk. It sat empty for a year before I bought it, but I didn't mind. I'd been living there for about 3 weeks when I first noticed the smell. It wasn't constant, just a faint whiff of something sour, like spoiled milk or damp cardboard, drifting up from the basement stairs. I figured it was old pipes, or maybe a dead mouse in the walls. Nothing urgent. The basement itself was unfinished. Bare concrete, exposed beams, and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. Most of my stuff was still in boxes along the walls. There was an old water heater in the corner, a cracked laundry sink next to it, and a wooden door on the far wall that I hadn't bothered to check yet. The basement wasn't exactly inviting, so I only went down when I needed something. Every time I did, the smell seemed a little stronger. Then, one night around 11 p.m., I heard it. I was half asleep on the couch, the TV playing some infomercial, when I heard a noise from the basement. A low, dull thud. Not super loud, but enough to jolt me awake. I sat up, heart beating a little faster. Probably just the house settling, I told myself. Then it happened again. Thump, thump, thump. Slow, rhythmic, coming from below. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked to the basement door. The closer I got, the stronger the smell became. Almost chemical now, burning my nose. I flipped the light switch. The single bulb flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the basement floor. I took the stairs slowly, each step creaking under my weight. At the bottom, I looked around. The boxes were untouched, the water heater silent, the sink dry. The noise had stopped. Then I noticed the wooden door. It was shut tight, but the frame looked warped, like something had been pushing against it from the other side. I don't know why I didn't just go back upstairs. Maybe I was too tired to think straight, or maybe I didn't want to feel afraid in my own house. Either way, I stepped closer and pressed my ear to the door. At first, nothing. Just my own breathing. Then, a faint scraping sound, like nails dragging across wood. I jumped back, my phone shaking in my hand. My mouth went dry, but before I could stop myself, I said, "Hello?" No answer. Just the smell getting even worse. I hesitated, then reached for the latch. My fingers felt numb, but I forced myself to lift it. The door stuck for a second before swinging open. A crawl space. The air inside was thick with dust, and the ground sloped downward into complete darkness. My flashlight barely cut through the shadows. In the corner, I saw something, piled up debris, old pipes. It was hard to tell. Then, thump. Closer this time. I slammed the door shut, shoved the latch down, and ran upstairs, locking the basement door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. Every noise in the house made my skin crawl. By morning, I had convinced myself it was an animal. A raccoon or a stray cat. I called a pest control guy, Mike, to check it out. Mike showed up that afternoon, all confident and casual, until he came back upstairs 20 minutes later, pale as a sheet. "You got a problem," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "That crawl space. It's bigger than it should be. Goes back maybe 30 feet under the foundation. And I found something down there." I frowned. "What?" "Scratches on the walls. Deep ones. and stuff. Clothes, old shoes. He paused. A kid's toy. A little plastic horse. It looked like something chewed on it. I stared at him. So, what are you saying? Mike ran a hand through his hair. I'm saying something's been living down there. His voice dropped lower. And it ain't no raccoon. I packed a bag and checked into a motel that night. I figured I'd deal with it later, hire someone to seal it up, maybe even sell the house. Then, around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was a picture. My basement. Taken from inside the crawlspace. The bulb was off, but I could still make out the stairs, the boxes, and a shadow. Tall, thin, hunched, standing exactly where I had stood. Then another text came through. You left the light on. I haven't gone back. I've lived in this house my whole life. 27 years. It's a small place, built in the 50s, with a basement my dad used as a workshop. After he passed last year, I took over the house. Mom's in a nursing home now, and I'm here alone. The basement's always been off limits to me growing up. Dad's rules. He'd spend hours down there, tinkering with tools. The door locked. I never questioned it. Now it's mine. And I wish I'd left it alone. It started with the humming. I'd be in the living room, scrolling my phone, when this low buzz would creep up through the floor. Not loud, just enough to make my teeth feel funny. I figured it was the furnace acting up. It's old, rusted, down in the basement. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed a flashlight and a screwdriver, thinking I'd tighten something, make it stop. The basement door's in the hallway. Heavy oak with a brass knob that's always cold. I flipped the light switch, and the single bulb flickered on, buzzing like a dying fly. The stairs creaked as I went down, the air getting thick and musty. Dad's workbench was still there, tools scattered, a stool tipped over like he'd just stepped out. The furnace sat in the corner, silent now, pipes snaking up the walls. But the humming wasn't coming from there. It was deeper behind the back wall. The wall was concrete, stained with age, but there was a crack running down it, maybe 3 feet long. I'd never noticed it as a kid. I pressed my ear to it, and the humming got clearer, steady, almost like a voice, but too low to make out. I tapped the wall with the screwdriver, and it stopped. Dead quiet. Then something tapped back. 3 slow knocks, hard enough to vibrate the concrete. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking. "Who's there?" I said, feeling dumb but scared. No answer, just the bulb flickering again. I saw it then. A shadow on the wall, stretched out, like someone standing behind me. I spun around, but the basement was empty. My breath was loud in my ears, and I noticed the smell, like burnt hair, faint but growing. I aimed the flashlight at the crack, and it looked wider now, dark inside, like it went somewhere. I don't know why I didn't run. Maybe because this was Dad's space, and I felt like I had to figure it out. I grabbed a hammer from the workbench and chipped at the crack. The concrete flaked off easy, too easy, revealing a hole big enough to stick my arm through. Cold air rushed out, carrying that burnt smell, and I heard it. A whisper, fast and garbled, like someone talking underwater. I shoved the flashlight in, and the beam caught something. A dirt floor, a tunnel sloping down, and a shape moving just out of sight. I yanked my hand back, heart slamming. The whispering stopped, but the air got heavy, like the room was holding its breath. Then the bulb popped, glass rained down, and I was in the dark, just my flashlight cutting through it. Something scraped, slow and deliberate, from the hole. I bolted for the stairs, but halfway up, the door slammed shut. I pounded on it, yelling, but it wouldn't budge. The scraping got louder, closer, and I felt the stairs shake, like something heavy was climbing up behind me. I threw my shoulder into the door, and it gave, spilling me into the hallway. I slammed it shut, dragged a bookshelf in front of it, and sat there shaking, till morning. The humming's back now, every night, louder than before. I hear the scraping too, sometimes right under the floor where I sleep. I found Dad's old journal in a box last week. Scribbled pages about keeping it sealed and don't let it out. He never said what it was, but he drew the crack, over and over. I haven't gone back down. The door's locked, barricaded, but last night, I saw dust trickling from the knob, like something's pushing from the other side. The house is mine, and I can't leave. Everything I've got is here. But I don't sleep much anymore. I just listen, waiting for whatever Dad locked away, to get tired of waiting too.